Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing our very first sew along. We're going to be using the Simplicity pattern for this dress, S8637. We're actually going to be making dress B right here. I've made this dress one time before and I just kind of tweaked it to my style, and I actually used it as an Easter dress. Today I'm going to be turning it into a beach cover-up using two fabrics, one that I got from Joann's and the other one that I got from a yard sale that was kind of, this lady was purging all of her sewing things. So we're going to be using this cute little sea turtle fabric. It is this nice cotton jersey kind of stretchy material, very flowy, perfect for the beach. And for our contrast in our lining, we're going to be using this tie-dye wavy turquoise pattern. So if you guys are excited for this video, go ahead and give it a big old thumbs up. If you are new here, please make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss another video. Alright guys, let's sew. Okay guys, so for this project you're going to need obviously your main fabric, your contrast fabric, some interfacing, obviously our pattern, and I'm going to be adding, like I said, buttons to this fabric, so you just want to choose a color that complements your fabric pretty well. If you're new and this is your first time ever following a pattern, I'm going to kind of give you a quick and easy way of how to read these on the back. So we're going to be making this dress over here, version B. We have a Simplicity S8637. So first of all, you want to know your size. Your sizes here, we have 6 through 24, and there's going to be 18 pieces in this pattern. So first you're going to want to know your size. You can go to Simplicity's website and learn the measurements that you'll need. You'll need your bust, your waist, your girth, usually, and it'll translate over to a size. The size that we're making today is going to be a 14 over here, so we're going to follow the 14 column all the way down. So first of all, your first column here is your fabrics. This tells you what kind of fabrics are best for this dress. So we have the challis, the cotton lawn, crepe. The one that I chose today is actually more of a stretchy jersey fabric that is not on this list, so I'm very interested in how it's going to turn out. But then of course we have our cotton back here that I'm going to use for our lining, so this is going to be interesting. But I made it with just the plain old cotton lawn prior and it did great. You have your notions, which is your extra little bits and bobs that are not your fabric. So you're going to need thread. And for dress B, we're going to need 3/4 of a yard of 1/4 inch wide elastic. And you're also going to need interfacing. So we're going to go over to size 14 for our lining. We're going to need 45 inch fabric and we're going to need 7/8 of a yard. For B dress, for the main fabric, we're going to go over here to dress 14. Size 14, dress B, we're going to need 3 1/8 yard of our main fabric. The finished garment measurements are down here, and then of course there's other languages at the bottom. I believe this one is in Spanish. Sorry, my pattern is really beat up. My dog has a knack for these patterns. For some reason they smell really good to her, so she always wants to eat them. This is like the third one she's eaten. Luckily all of the paper inside was intact, but she just ate the outside, so we kind of lost a little bit there, but no important information. Okay, once you open up your pattern, the first thing you're going to do is want to pull out the instructions. So we're going to be making dress B, and over here it tells you what pieces you need for each dress. So I actually went and took a highlighter and highlighted all of the pieces that I'm going to need. So for dress B, we're going to need pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 11, following down the list here. So we're going to go over to the other tissue pieces in our package, and we're going to start cutting out all of these pieces. So for example, this is piece number 2, and you're going to cut along what size you need. So on here we have sizes 6, 8, 12, 10, 12, and 14. We are going to do size 14, so we cut along the line for size 14. Make sure you cut out all of your tissue pieces for your pattern. If you want, after cutting out these tissue pieces, you can copy them over onto tracing paper. I don't like to do that extra step, that's just me, but you do risk damaging these in the process. Just so you know, that's completely up to you on how you want to do it. So once you have all of your tissue paper cut out or traced and cut, you're going to start cutting them on your fabric. Your directions actually has cutting layouts recommended for you on how to lay out your pieces on your fabric to get the most for your money and make sure everything fits. When you're reading your pieces, just make sure, so for example, this is piece number 2, this is going to be the back of our bodice. We're going to cut 1 on fold of fabric and 1 of fold of lining, so there's actually going to be 2 of these. So our first step is going to be doing a stay stitch and making our darts. So the first thing I'm going to do is taking my heat transfer pen, and we're going to copy over our darts onto our fabric. We have both our lining and our exterior fabric here. So we're going to go ahead and just transfer over these dots here. Okay, so I have my dots on both sides, so now we're ready to start making our stay stitch and our darts. We're going to do this on both the lining and the exterior fabric. So for our stay stitch, we're going to be sewing in the direction of the arrows on our pattern. So this is going to be piece 2 that we're working on. It wants us to sew towards the middle. So we're going to sew about following the directions here. It's going to be a 1/2 inch away from the edge towards the middle on both the lining and the exterior fabric. When we go to piece 1, we're going to be sewing from the bottom towards the neckline to the shoulder on piece 1 here. We're going to start making our darts. So with right sides together, we're going to grab our 2 little dots, making a triangle, and we're going to pin. So what I usually do is I go ahead and stick a pin through my first dot and then my second, and I just kind of check the other side of the fabric and make sure they match through. And we're going to pin. And then I usually put in another pin through my second dot right here, so I know where to stop. So now we're going to stitch from dot 1 to dot 2 all the way up, so kind of making that diagonal line all the way across. We're going to take that pin out there. We're not going to backstitch here, we're just going to sew off the edge. Cut this strings nice and long and hand tie this into a knot. And this is just going to help those darts lay nice and flat. So now we'll repeat this for there is our finished dart. We're going to repeat this for our other side here. So there is what your pieces are going to look like after you are stay stitched and darted for piece 2. So now we're going to put these to the side and go over to piece number 1. So piece number 1, you should have a total of 4, 2 of your exterior fabric and 2 of your lining fabric. We're going to repeat the same step as we did with piece 2. We're going to put these darts in. We have 2 darts for this piece, and we're going to stay stitch on this piece from the bottom to the top towards the neckline. So there we have all 4 pieces of piece 1, our bodice, front, lining, and outside of our fabric, all finished with our darts and our stay stitching on the neckline. You're going to want to take these over to your iron and just iron in your darts inward towards the neckline. It's just going to help it lay a little bit flat. And we're going to move on to step 2. For step 2, you're going to need your pieces 5 and 6. We're going to take both of these pieces, lay them out. So we're going to fold this in half lengthwise with right sides together and pin all along this edge. So we have it folded right sides together and pinned lengthwise. Now you're going to go along and sew a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all across the top and this side over here. You're going to leave the side with the dots on your pattern open, so that's going to be this side here. So again, I'm going to go sew up and over all the way to the end of a 3/8 seam allowance for piece 6. So we have piece 6 all sewn together with that 3/8 of seam allowance. You can see it right here. You can go ahead and press this flat if you want, but we are going to turn it right side out in just a minute. But next we're going to go over to piece 5. Piece 5, we're going to do the exact same thing, only the side that we're going to leave open is our opposite side this time. So we're going to fold it right sides together, pin along the length, and leave open our left side this time. Okay, now you're going to take pieces 5 and 6 that we just sewn and you're going to turn them right side out. I love to use like a little bit of a paintbrush to kind of turn it inside out, and I just kind of guide it over the paintbrush just like that. You can also use a pen, a pencil, anything that'll really just fit in that spot. Once I get it out the other side, I'm going to start to pull. And there we go. It is right side out. You can press this flat if you'd like. We're going to do both pieces moving on with step 3. So we've got our strings 5 and 6 all pressed nice and flat. So now you're going to take your outside fabric of your bodice with your ties, go ahead and lay them out flat. So remember, you're looking at a mirror image. Your left is going to be the right side of your pattern, and your right is going to be the left side of the pattern. So you're going to take your short string, short number 5, and we're going to pin our open end, matching our dots that we had on our pattern earlier, to your fabric. And you're going to do the mirror image with piece 6 to your bodice front. So you're going to pin right here, and we're going to take this over to our machine and baste these in place. So to baste, in case you have never sewn before and this is one of your first projects, you're going to make your stitch length as long as possible. So on my machine that is a 4, and we're just going to sew straight across. And you are not going to back stitch on a baste, because usually that's just a basting stitch is just to kind of hold it in place, and back stitching makes it more difficult to undo those stitches later. So it'll look just like that. You can tell here my stitches are longer here than they were up in my stay stitch. So my stay stitch is a size 2 on my machine, and this is a size 4. So you can definitely tell those are longer. They're easier to undo, and they will unravel. So basting is just kind of a placeholder. Okay, now since we're making dress B, we're actually gonna skip ahead in the directions to step 11. So we went from step 3 to step 11. So now we're gonna start attaching the bodice together. So I have my bodice back, piece number 2, down here right side up. We're gonna attach pieces 1 at the shoulder seams, matching our notches, right sides together. So this is my piece 1 with actually piece 6 attached. We're going to match our shoulder seams at the top with our notches. So there I am. There we have piece 1 attached to piece 2 at our shoulder seam. We're going to repeat this on the other side, and we're going to sew both of these with our 4/8 seam allowance. We're also going to do the exact same thing with our lining. So once you've sewn that at the shoulder seams, it'll look something like this. This is the lining piece, but then you can tell when you fold it over, you're actually starting to look like a shirt almost. And we're starting to take some shape here. So that was step 11. We're going to move on to step 12 and start working on our sleeves. So if you're following along with the actual paper instructions, this step can be a little confusing. So for step 12, you're going to take piece 10. I'm going to put this aside because I do not need it right now. So you have 2 little arm floopies, as I like to call them, but I believe they're called flounces. So we're going to put one of these aside. We're just going to work with one right now. So our first step of step 12, so step 12A, we're going to press under 1/4 of an inch of this bottom edge. So we're going to go around measuring 1/4 of an inch all the way around, pinning it in place, and then we're going to press it down on our iron. Once we have that all pressed and pinned, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew that in place. So as you can tell, 1/4 of an inch is going to be very small, so we're going to be very careful with this. And we're going to go all the way around, pinning it at 1/4 of an inch. You can eyeball it like I am if you want, or if you are just very OCD and you want everything to be perfect, you can measure it all the way around. It's up to you. I don't want to take that time. Some projects I do take that time, but I am not going to today. So there's half of it, kind of all pinned very loosely. This one could use another pin. But you're going to take this over to your iron and you're going to press this down. So this is what you should look like after you have folded 1/4 of an inch, pressed and stitched close to your edge. The next part, so step 12B, we're going to fold this in half again, turning it into a 1/8 of an inch. Press again and sew again. This is going to hide that raw edge. So folding it in half again to 1/8 of an inch, press and sew. And that is what it should look like after you have folded it over to 1/8 and you've sewn. So you have now this finished little seam and hem all the way around. So you can kind of tell where my stitches got off on my fold. I'm not super worried about it because this is going to be bunched with the elastic in a little bit. So our next step for step 12, so 12C, is you're going to baste 5/8 of an inch all the way around your upper edge. So we finished doing our basting along the upper edge. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start making the casing for the elastic. In the instructions, I think it's actually kind of backwards. So I'm going to show you how I do it. You're going to fold under 1/4 of an inch again and press to hide your raw edge. Then we're going to fold again onto that basting that we just did, and we're going to sew, making your casing. So your casing is going to be probably about 1/4. You want it to be between 1/4 and 1/2 inch wide because you have to get the elastic through. So we're going to fold our raw edge under, and then we're going to fold again and sew along our basting stitch. Okay, so here's my piece. With my fabric, it tends to like to roll. So I did it 2 ways. I have piece number 1 where I folded the 4th under to hide the raw edge, which it looks kind of just like that. And then about halfway I stopped rolling under that raw edge because my fabric actually doesn't unravel all that much. But if you're using more of a cotton fabric, you definitely want to fold under the raw edge. And then we just stitched right along that edge, making that casing. So the next thing you're going to do is pull out your basting to remove that extra stitch. So this is why we did not backstitch. And you're just going to pull it right out. Just like that. That's what I meant when I told you basting was just kind of a placeholder. So now there's no extra stitching there. It's completely gone. For this next part, you're going to take your elastic, which was piece 11. Now, what I've learned from making this project before is that the elastic and the arm sleeves were too big for me. So I encourage you actually to take your elastic and measure around your arm. Mine ends up going about 12 inches. I gave it a little bit of extra, just so you're not suffocating your arm with the elastic, and 2, you don't have too much and this is going to be too loose. So measure around your arm with your elastic. Next, you're going to need a safety pin. So we're going to attach the safety pin into our elastic and start feeding it through that casing we just made. All right, so we've made it through to the other side. So now you're going to take a pin your elastic on both sides, and we're going to sew right across the elastic and backstitch a few times to lock this in place. Okay, so now moving on to step 14, we're going to grab our first little flounce, your arm floopy thing, and we're gonna pin it to our armhole. So when we cut, we cut our notches into our fabric. So we have 2 notches here and 1 notch on our other side. We're gonna match our notches. So your double notch is on the back and our first notch is on the front. So we're gonna pin the right sides together of the armhole right up here, and then we're going to baste. Okay, so there we are, we're pinned together. Now we're gonna go ahead and baste both of these seams. For step 15, we're actually gonna start applying our interfacing. So that's gonna be pieces 3 and 4. If you don't know how to apply interfacing, every interfacing comes with instructions. Please read those. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, definitely check that out. I will show you how to put on interfacing. But we're gonna go ahead, taking our lining, taking the wrong side of the fabric, and we're gonna start applying the interfacing. We're gonna put piece 3 along this edge here and piece 4 along the edge here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take this over to my iron and put this on, and we will check back. There we go. That is our interfacing attached. Alright, so now we have both of our pieces. We're gonna start putting right sides together, and we're gonna pin along the neckline and the armholes. Be careful of these little guys. You want to tuck them in so that they're not in the way, so that they don't get caught in your stitching. Alright, now that we have everything pinned, we're gonna stitch with our standard seam allowance around the armholes and around the neckline all the way around. When you're sewing, make sure your straps are actually tucked in and out of the way so you don't catch them. I have mine tied in a knot so they don't get stuck. But we're going to keep them tucked in. We're going to catch those edges. right that we basted earlier right up in here. Okay, so we have the neckline and the armholes all sewn together. Now, if you have a serging machine or a finishing stitch, you can go around these edges and finish those. But if you're going to go by the directions, you're going to trim these seams as close as you can, and you're going to clip the corners before we turn it inside out. If you have pinking shears, this is actually a good time to use them. Pinking shears, for those of you who don't know, have these kind of zigzag blade to them that help prevent your seam from unraveling. So I used one side with my regular blade. This side, I'm going to show you guys what the pinking shears look like. Okay, so your pinking shears end up leaving this zigzagged edge just to help keep it from unraveling nearly as much. Just be careful you don't cut your seam when you go so close. And then we're just going to clip our corners just to help it turn a little bit easier, just by giving it a little notch. The last dress that I made, with the dress that I made of this pattern earlier, I actually didn't do this step, so I'm curious what kind of difference it's going to make. So we have all of our edges cut, so now we're going to turn it right side out, passing through the shoulder. So this is going to be a little bit tricky, and it does throw you off because of the little shoulders that we tucked in. So, but trust me, it makes sense once you do it. So there you go. Now we are right side out. Now we're going to go over, and your directions actually say to understitch the lining as far as possible. Excuse me, I'm going to go over to my iron and just press these seams so they'll lay nice and flat. Alright, so for step 17, we're going to do our side seams. So we're going to grab our pins and I almost said our jacket, our bodice here, and we're going to open this up. I'm going to start with one side first, and we're going to pin right sides together of our lining and follow it all the way up this side here. Okay, and we're going to do this on both sides, and we will sew with our standard seam allowance. Okay, so this is what the top of the bodice looks like with our little arm floofy things all nice and tailored. So once you get those side seams done, just go ahead, try it on, make sure it fits. This is still open, it's still going to be awkward. We are going to go back and put in a buttonhole later about along this seam, probably here, for our strings to go through. This is a little bit different than the instructions will tell you. I am showing you how I do it, but you are welcome to take it with a grain of salt. As you can see, this kind of can have a very deep V-neck if you want it to, which is why I have added buttons in my design, and I will show you guys how to do that as well. But next thing is going to be the skirt, so let's head back to the drawing board. Okay, so the good news is the hard part's done, the bodice is done and set aside for now. We're going on to the skirt. So I have pieces 8 and 9. The first thing we're going to do is going to be step 18, and we're going to stay stitch the top of these. So for piece 8, we're going to go inwards here towards our flat edge, and same thing for our long edge, I guess I should say. And same thing for piece 9, we're going to go inwards towards the long edge. Okay, so we're moving on to step 19, and we're going to stitch the center back seam. So you're going to take pieces 8 and 9, and you're going to put them together right along the center back seam. So you're just going to pin right sides together all the way down, and we're going to sew with our standard seam allowance. You're going to do this on both, with all 4 panels, so you'll end up with 2 pieces. Okay, we put the first side of 8 and 9 together. Now we're going to put the other piece together. So right sides together, you're going to go ahead and match those, and we're going to make the back seam. So right sides together here, right on top of each other, we're going to match these notches, and we're going to sew down this seam, making one big piece of 4 panels. Okay, so now you have this big one long skirt piece with 4 panels. So you can try it on if you'd like, figure out if you want it to be longer, shorter. It's
gonna wrap around just like the rest of the dress. It is a wrap. It will come up and tie right about here. So now we're gonna go over and work on the hem. So now we're on step 20. For those of you following the directions, we are gonna work on the hem of the skirt. So we're gonna baste 5/8 of an inch all the way around the entire length of the skirt. Then we're gonna press it on that basting. We're going to be making that same narrow hem we made earlier in our little arm sleeves. So we're going to baste along the edge, press up to that basting, and then we're going to sew again, flipping those raw edges in, leaving in that little, about 1/4 of an inch seam. So if you're following the directions, you're going to have something that kind of looks like this, making that narrow hem. I'm going to show you guys how to do something different. We're going to do a zigzag stitch that's going to catch all those raw edges and finish up all of our seams. So let's head over to the sewing machine and I'll show you guys how to do it. Okay, so we're over at our sewing machine. I have my seam folded over right at that 5/8 of an inch basting that we had done earlier, just like in the instructions. So here's my basting. I have it folded over just at that 5/8 of an inch. So we're gonna go over to our sewing machine. I'm gonna change this back, but we're gonna change this over to a size 2, and we're gonna come down here to our stitching wheel and change the stitch. So I'm gonna come over to a basic zigzag stitch, which is my gray one right here. I could do a double, or I think that's a triple zigzag, based on S1 or S2, but we're gonna keep it basic, just keep it on the gray setting. So my needle already moved over, it's ready to go, and we are gonna back stitch with this as well. Just following along, keeping my fingers down here to keep it folded over on that basting. And when you're sewing, you're going to sew right on this line so that your needle will come over and back, catching the raw edge in between the zigzag. Okay, so with that zigzag stitch, you'll have something that looks a little something like this. And you can just see it catches that raw edge and just keeps it all nice and pretty. Or you can do the narrow hem like we had done before. Either way works, and now we're going to just pull out that basting stitch on the top here. Okay, we have our skirt all stitched together with our zigzag stitch, so now we're going to attach our skirt to our bodice. So we're going to lay them, I have my turtle side up of my top. We're going to go turtle to turtle, right sides together, and we're going to match those notches along the bottom edge of the bodice, all the way across, matching those edges. We're going to pin, and we'll sew with our standard allowance. There you go, your dress is in one piece. You're almost completely done with as far as the simplicity instructions go. The only thing we have left to do is add the little hole where your strap is going to feed through. It's going to be the longer of the two straps, so that's going to be the left. So your hole is actually probably going to go right over here. You'll weave around and you'll tie in a knot. So I'll show you how to add that little hole using a buttonhole instead of how Simplicity does it. We're also going to add a few little buttons right here just to keep it a little bit closed, a little bit more comfortable and covered for us, and we're going to add some pockets. Okay, it's day 3. I am determined to finish this dress today. All I have to do left is do that buttonhole for the tie, add the buttons to the neckline, pockets, and make all of our seams nice and pretty. But we're almost done. We just gotta power through. This project probably can take just one day. I broke it up over several days because I also work full-time. If you're an expert sewer, this project will only probably take you a day, maybe not even. I consider myself a moderate to beginner level sewer. I can figure out a pattern, I can decipher it and usually figure it out, but it's usually through a lot of trial and error. So that's why I'm making these videos, so that you guys can learn from my mistakes. So let's get back over and finish this baby. Okay, so for our dress ties in the buttonhole, we are going to put on the right side of the dress, the side with the shorter tie, because our left side has the longer tie. That's going to be the side that you're going to want to feed through and around. So we're going to put our buttonhole right on this seam, right underneath the arm. So we're going to take it over to the machine, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Some machines have a presser foot for this purpose. I'm just going to be using my standard presser foot. Okay, so I'm over here. I only want my buttonhole to be probably about 1 inch long. So I'm actually going to mark that on my seam just a little bit away from the waistline to help guide me later. Okay, so going over to our machine, I'm going to change it over to the buttonhole setting. And actually on my top wheel, it also has another kind of buttonhole. So I'm going to turn it right over to that little setting on my stitch length. I go over to the machine. So it's going to start, it's just going to do a straight line. It's up to you to do your top, bottom, and your sides of your buttonhole. So make sure you get nothing caught underneath it. So I'm going to do the first long side. Okay, ending with my press your foot down. We're going to turn and do our short side now. So this is the bottom of the buttonhole. Okay, you really don't need this one to be super long. So we're going to turn again and do our opposite side. And I have learned with buttonholes specifically on my machine, not to pull the fabric, just let the feed dogs guide it, because then you mess up the stitch length and the space between stitches. Okay, stopping there at our mark. I'm just taking a peek under to make sure I have met, and we're going to turn again, and now we're going to do the top. So there we can see is our little buttonhole with our top, our bottom. You can tell right up here is where I was pulling at the fabric, and it did spread out the stitches. We have our top and our bottom. They're a little bit off. I'm not super worried about it. If you are OCD about that kind of thing, just making sure you have the right marks and your marks are super visible. So now we're going to take our seam ripper and just rip open that fabric right here. Be careful when you do this, because I have ripped all the way through before and it ruins your whole project. Okay, so we used our seam ripper and opened that up, so now we have a little hole. Make sure that you have actually made your buttonhole big enough for your tie to slip through. Mine's a little on the small side, but with this fabric, it's just how not flimsy, how squishy it is. It moves through actually really easy. So you just want to kind of test it before you move on, because if you need to make it bigger, you'll just seam rip right through these and just make it and extend that buttonhole. Alright, so now let's move on to the pockets. So for the pockets, you're going to use some more of your lining fabric. This is a great opportunity to use that scrap fabric you have laying around if you just want to add like a little extra fun pop, making it a really contrast. I'm going to be using the same lining that I used for the bodice, and then I have my pocket insert. I actually made this insert myself based on another YouTuber's design. You can use a pocket pattern from another sewing pattern if you want, or you can make your own. What I just kind of did was kind of used it at my hand as a guide of how big I want it to go, and I also used my phone because that's the thing that I always want to put in my pocket, so I just wanted to make sure that my phone would fit. This is an iPhone 11 for sizing, so I just cut it out, made sure my hand fit, made sure that my cat's playing in the background. Make sure my phone fit, make sure my hand fit, and just kind of cut out this shape. You're going to want your gradient going this way, and you're going to cut 2 of these for each pocket. So I'm going to cut a total of 4, and then we're going to add our standard seam allowance. Okay, so now we're going to start attaching our pockets to our skirt. So we're going to open up our skirt, and we're going to go a few inches down from the waistline, and we're going to open up probably about a 5 to 7 inch gap in this seam, making sure that our pocket's going to be able to fit. I think this one is about 7 inches, but so we're going to do about a gap about that big, opening it up in the seam, and then we're going to pin with right sides together, kind of just like that. So I'm just putting a pin to mark where I want my pocket to stop and start our opening. You can make sure you try on your dress so you know where you want your pocket to lay. We're going to take our seam ripper, or you could take some scissors, and we're going to open this up. Okay, so there we have our opening. So now we're going to take our pocket, find our opening here, and we're going to pin. So you want your little swoop to go down, because obviously you don't want your pocket going upwards. That doesn't make much sense, does it? So we want our pocket going down, and we're going to pin both edges here, right along that side. Okay, and using our standard seam allowance, we're going to go ahead and sew the
these pockets right into place.
So both of our pockets are sewn now. I'm gonna go ahead and push these through to the other side, and we're gonna flip it over. So now our pockets, we have our right sides together with the outside. So now we're going to go ahead and pin around the edge of the pocket. I'm also gonna pin right above the pocket where we're gonna sew again where the seam is still split. So we'll have to close that back up. Alright, so we're gonna take this back over to our sewing machine. We're gonna start a little above where our pocket is, so around the pocket and back down past the pocket to make sure this is all sealed. We're going to leave this part open, remember, because this is where your hand's going to go. Alright, so there's our pocket all the way sewn all the way across, so that when we flip it over, we're going to go ahead and you want to press these seams so that they lay nice and flat, but you now have a nice little pocket. And then if it ever does get turned inside out, you have the nice pretty lining. Okay, we'll press this flat and we will repeat the other side for the second pocket. Alright, we have our pockets sewn in. You are almost done. We're almost at the last step. Next thing is going to be to finishing our seams, all on the inside of the dress. If you have a serging machine, this would be a great time to use it. You could also use your pinking shears. What I'm going to do and what I like best is to go through on all of these seams, on the center seam, on each one of these inside the skirt. We're going to do a zigzag stitch, catching that raw edge. It's just going to help prevent anything from unraveling and coming apart in the washing machine. So we're going to go over to your sewing machine, and this is going to be a long process. So make sure you have plenty of thread because we're going to do every single raw seam inside this dress. We're back in the bathroom. So all of my seams have been finished. I decided to actually go through with pinking shears on this one. The other version of the dress I did the zigzag stitch. I will show you guys both of those. So try on your dress. You're almost done, but try it on. So we're gonna go ahead. I have my little, what do you call it, our tie, and we're gonna feed it through a little hole here. Make sure your hole's big enough. If it's not big enough, this isn't gonna work. We're going to go ahead and start pulling through, and we're going to start putting the dress together. So when I was messing with these, I saw that my straps weren't held down as much as I would like, so I'm going to go back through it and reattach those. We're going to go ahead and wrap around, and I'm going to come over here and tie. You can tie this however you like. I'm just doing it this way right now. Puppy, can you go? So I have it nice and tied. This is very, very low cut. This is why I added buttons. So what you're gonna do at this point now is if you want the buttons, you're gonna go ahead and kind of figure out where you want them. So we're gonna go ahead and measure where we want our buttons, and we'll put those on. Okay, so final thoughts on this dress. This is a very easy dress to make because this dress is actually a gift for someone else. I couldn't tailor the buttons how I normally would wear it, so that's why it's a little gapey on me. But otherwise, she and I are pretty much the same size, so this fits pretty good. I like this material. It's a lot more comfortable than the other version of the dress that I made. So things that I think I could do better next time are measuring the elastics for the flounces. I think the original pattern elastics were too long, and then when I tried to make my own, they were still too long, so I ended up having to pull a bunch of elastic out. This one is still too big for my arm, but I know that her arm, it is most likely going to fit her better, and I'm probably going to have to retailor that later. But aside from that, and just working on doing my seams a lot cleaner, I think this is a great project and a great dress. And I know my version I look forward to wearing again. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button if this helped you at all, if you enjoy any of this content, and make sure you subscribe. It's really gonna help support the channel. I love all of your support. If you've made something like this in the past, or if you decide to make your own, let me know in the comments. I wanna see them. Or you could tag me on Instagram at Blue Eyed Wolf Princess. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!